Hey, it's Mike Schreiber. Welcome to the JohnWallStreet Business of College Sports podcast, powered by Playfly Sports. I am the founder and executive chairman of Playfly Sports, and I'm excited to have on our podcast today Val Ackerman, the Big East commissioner, amazing career, Hall of Fame inductee, you name it, Val has done it. So we're going to talk all things Big East today, and so welcome to the program here, Val. Thanks for being on with us.
Hey, Mike, great to be with you, as always.
Yeah, it's so exciting. So, just a precursor to some of the topics we're going to get into here. Val and I both went to UVA, so I've got my Virginia Cavaliers mug here. Even though we're talking Big East today, we have
Wahoo-wah,
that fun little
wahoo-wah.
connection,
Yeah.
wahoo-wah. So keeping things level set. That's the cool thing about college fandom, by the way, across all the businesses we work in, whether it's in your business at Big East or our business at Playfly Sports. It's all about the fans. So people stick to their fandom, which is so cool. So just with us as our both of our UVA connections here, you just can see how people stick with their fandom for their whole lives, and only gain more really over time. Very few people actually lapse their fandom. So it's one of the cool things to operate in this space because fandom is forever, which is kind of awesome. So anyhow, we'll move off of that and talk about Big East. So thanks for being on the program here. The first thing I wanted to talk about is all the excitement around the Big East and all the changes and elements. We're going to talk today a little bit about sponsorship, about media rights, about some of the amazing storylines that are happening in the Big East. But first, I thought we'd just talk about some of the stuff that we do together as a starting point, and then move into a lot of other topics, which is the sponsorship and fan engagement side of the business. Really interesting and exciting developments in that space as the growth of the Big East continues to drive dominance in the college sports space. But seeing sponsors like Jeep re-sign up again for another long-standing multi-year sponsorship, even new partners coming into the space like Colgate and Acorns and College Ave. We're just excited to see so many more brands seeing the Big East as a home for driving their marketing goals. So I just was interested in seeing and hearing from your perspective, how do you see the changes in that landscape evolving? And do you see that expanding sort of sponsor list as something that shows a sign for the future and the growth for the Big East for you in the conference?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Well, first of all, I want to laud Playfly, who has been our agent of record for several years now, following your acquisition of Fox Sports College Properties some years back, which was the original sales and marketing agent for the Big East when the conference reconfigured in 2013. And that's when I came on board. Just for the listener, the Big East has been around for 45 years. 46 years now in 2025, founded in 1979, started out as a basketball-centric conference, grew to include football, and in 2013, due to a variety of developments at that time in college sports, made the decision to go back to its roots, and it now has gone back to being a basketball-centric conference. We sponsor 22 sports. Football's not one. So the answer to your question, Mike, is it did create sort of a different sales proposition in the collegiate space because at the conference level, as you know, we're selling conference championships, not regular season contests.
Right.
The NCAA, of course, has the national championship space to themselves. So trying to find the right sales pitches around the assets that we control, took some time to really fine tune and to hone. And with Playfly's help, we've been able to do that. We have seen very strong interest in the Big East, this iteration of the Big East. The interest, I think, frankly, is mostly around our basketball championships, men and women. Our men's tournament has been at Madison Square Garden since 1983. Since I took over, have signed 2 extensions that will allow us to be at the Garden through at least 2032, which would represent the 50th year of the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden. So I'd like to think, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd like to think that that's going to create some interest for partners as that anniversary approaches. With the re-arrival of UConn back in the Big East in 2020, we have staged our women's tournament at the Mohegan Sun Arena, which is it's really a terrific sort of right size venue for most basketball games. It's about 9,000 fans. It's in the heart of women's basketball country in Connecticut. So we've really had much success staging our women's event there, and that's we have found has had appeal as well to our partners. So those two events, most of all, have driven our program. But the other 20 sports also have some interest there. And as you mentioned, Mike, we've had a great roster led by Jeep. Um, and Invesco QQQ has signed on as sort of the secondary spot and also has sponsored a number of other conference programs that we've created. And as you noted, we've gotten some new partners that are doing some cool activations at our tournaments, especially. I note Acorns, they had an activation this year where they had a big glass thing set up in a concourse, and you had to guess the number of acorns in the big glass structure. And
Yeah.
they had some people dressed up as squirrels sort of running around encouraging people to make a guess so they could award you, a dollar prize if you got it right or close. So there's some interesting things that are going on, and our sponsors, I think, recognize the importance of activating around the association. And of course, that financial support helps us as well. So we've been very pleased with the program, and we think future positive associations and successes loom.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate the comments there. One of the growth elements that you have been so successful at creating is media and viewership and audience growth. Over the past year, restructuring your media rights deal, and actually seeing some of the results this past year. The Playfly Insights team has presented me and showed me a little bit of the numbers when you see what happened year over year these last 2 years, and the significant growth in men's basketball, but even bigger growth in women's basketball for the Big East Championships. And so I'm just excited to hear a little bit more about that new media rights deal that you struck, the 6-year media rights deal that not only kept Fox as your main partner, but added NBC and Peacock, added Warner Brothers and Discovery, and how that's going and how you feel. Obviously, the numbers are proving that it's going really well, so congrats on that success. But love to hear your thoughts on how that deal has evolved and maybe how you're going after some of the younger digital first audiences as well as part of that.
Right. Well, we're really excited, Mike, about our new deal, which we announced last June, so a year ago. Last year represented the second to last year of our current deal. It was year 11 of a 12-year deal, so now we're finishing up the 12th year. And that original deal, another little bit of background here, was struck when the conference reconfigured in 2013. It was a deal with Fox Sports, which at the time was on the verge of launching FS1,
Mm.
the summer of 2013, which the intent of which was to compete with ESPN most of all in the national sports cable space. And so Fox was on. It was really coincidental timing. The Big East was reconfiguring. Fox was looking for wintertime programming, especially, and saw in Big East basketball tonnage, quality tonnage, if you will, and the prospect of bringing big brands, big basketball brands to Fox Air. And so it has been a really, really great partnership over the last 12 years with the Fox team, starting out with Executive Vice President Larry Jones, who was just a real champion of the Big East internally, really supported the conference in so many ways in our schools. Now, with Larry's retirement, Jordan Bazant has stepped in as Executive Vice President and has been equally vigorous in his support of the league. So we have really benefited greatly from the coverage. Of course, every men's basketball game has been on Fox Air, including our tournament. We've had good coverage for women's basketball and Olympic sports, but that has all improved yet further with our new deal, which again we entered into last year. That deal keeps Fox as our primary network partner, with plans to keep Big East basketball most of all on the Fox Broadcast Network, FS1, a little bit on FS2, but has added NBC, Peacock, and Warner Brothers Discovery to the mix. So we are entering into the world of a multi-network package. So that aligns with what we're seeing elsewhere. Other leagues have gone the same route. We, in particular with NBC, will see men's basketball, a healthy number of men's basketball games on streaming for the first time in Peacock. And in fact, this past year, Peacock got a head start on their association with a handful of regular season contests and 5 of our Big East men's basketball tournament games on the Peacock platform, which went very well. The
Yeah.
production quality was good. The viewership was meeting their expectations. And they assigned really top-rate talent to the games. So we were very pleased. Interestingly, the head of NBC Sports is a Providence College alum and played on the men's basketball team there, Rick
Awesome.
Cordella. So he's been enthusiastic, which has been heartening
Yeah.
about their relationship. And then Warner Brothers Discovery will bring to the mix this year TBS and TNT and True and HBO Max. Now, of course, the developments of late, we're learning to hear more about what impact that would have on the Big East, but we're suspecting it won't really affect us really much at all. So anyway, we go into next year with a new package with robust coverage of men's basketball, improved coverage of women's basketball. Our Olympic sport championships will remain on linear for the most part. And I will tell you, we're in the closing stages of finishing up a deal with another partner that would allow a small number of men's basketball games, the women's basketball games that are not on linear,
Mm.
and then a whole range of Olympic sport contests to continue on a prominent streaming platform, and hope to have some news on that in the coming weeks. So, long story short, we're kind of everywhere, Mike.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of the way of the world, I think, with many sports properties. And to your question, yeah, we're trying to, the goals of this were to maintain our exposure, to meet our financial objectives, and frankly, to ease into the streaming universe
Yeah.
because we didn't have a lot of that in the first deal. And now that will be, as I said, a healthy part of our coverage now, but that does seem to be how viewers are following their sports teams in this day and age. And as technology improves and younger viewers in particular become very adept at second screens, we don't expect we're going to lose a step in terms of our reach to our fans and the ability of this great collection of networks to continue to tell the Big East story.
That's great. That's great. It's really helpful for our audience who is made up of a lot of college industry leaders as well as pro team leaders, just to hear how you think about media rights and how you constructed that new deal to address the changing world, which is exciting to hear. So thank you for walking us through that. Now, probably the topic you're most exhausted by, which let's talk about revenue sharing and the settlement here. I think the interesting thing is for the Big East, right? And not only do you have the Pope, right? And you can see my Villanova ball here back there as a partner of ours, but you've got the Pope. But the coolest thing that I think outside of the Pope being part of the Big East now is that you have a basketball conference in the world of revenue sharing, which I think, and I'd be interested in having the audience hear from you, that actually puts you in a competitive advantage to the ability to share in your schools in a way that actually puts more value towards your prominent sport of basketball than maybe some other sort of football centric schools can. So it's just interesting that specific thing. Overall, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the settlement and revenue sharing, but that element I just think is so interesting, and how that maybe changes your coaches recruiting for your schools and how it just sort of elevates the Big East. I think is just such an interesting topic for our audience to hear about.
Well, let me start with the bigger picture here, Mike, which is that, as I'm sure your listeners know, college sports has been in the midst of um, really significant change over the last several years as more and more benefits have made their way to student athletes, rightfully. Um, the fact that that's the right thing to do is sort of point one. But point two, these changes have been hastened by legal challenges to the collegiate model that have questioned the restrictions on athlete, if you will, compensation and benefits in ways that have again hastened this process and and brought us to where we are today, which is on the, as you said, on the onset of this new revenue sharing era. Um, the arrangement that was devised as part of the settlement of a series of cases led by the so-called House cases has two components. One is a damages assessment that all NCA schools are sharing in order to pay, if you will, back NIL, back name, image, and likeness payments. But number two, going forward, a system that will allow schools to begin, it's optional, it's not required, but if they so choose, to begin sharing directly with their athletes payments for NIL. That has not been allowed up until now. The payments for NIL, which have been happening since 2021, have been required to be paid by third parties, not by the universities and colleges themselves. And so that has, because of the third party payment system, we've seen the advent of greater donor involvement, the formation of so-called collectives, which I like
Yep.
to describe people as just sort of packs of donors
Mhm.
that are pooling their money in order to make NIL payments to athletes from their alma maters. And of course, the payments by so-called brands is happening as well, but to a lesser degree. You really have to be a nationally prominent athlete in order to, in my observation, to secure a brand deal from a
Right.
Nike or a State Farm or a Gatorade or whatever. So it turns out that most of the NIL payments to date have been paid by the third party collectives. Um, in any event, schools can now begin sharing with the athletes directly. That system is optional, as I said. Big East schools, we're opting into that model. So the beginnings of the answer to the second part of your question is yes, the Big East is prepared to share revenue directly with our athletes. Um, there are no rules right now other than not exceeding the cap for
Mm.
the revenue share payments about how you can about where those monies can be shared. And so in our case, it's our expectation that our revenue payments are going to go primarily to basketball players, men and women.
Mhm.
Um, we, as I noted earlier, the Big East does not sponsor football. We
Right.
have 4 schools that play football,
Mhm.
1 at the FBS level, that's UConn. We have
Yep.
3 that play at the next level, the FCS level, that's Georgetown, Villanova, and Butler. But we don't receive as a conference any football revenue. And that does put us in a very different place financially from the conferences that we consider peers in basketball.
Right.
They're able to benefit from their football revenue. We don't have that revenue. So, frankly, they have an advantage right now
Mhm.
because they have a higher level of resources than we have. That said, they have a higher level of expense as well because their football revenues, as best I can tell, have to be used in large part to pay their football expenses. And that will include direct payments to their athletes under the revenue sharing model. We will not be paying, our schools will not have, I can't speak for all of them, but my sense is our schools aren't going to be making payments to the athletes for football. So that does allow us to prioritize basketball in this
Mhm.
revenue sharing world. And while I can't really share with you, spending levels or anything like that, I can say our schools are going to lean into that.
Yeah.
Basketball is the most important sport on our campuses. We're not competing with football for that, that privilege, if you will. And our schools, it's critically important to them to be nationally relevant and competitive in that sport. We've got a great track record of success. Our schools want to keep that going. Um, how they plan to do that, is really going to be on them. How they're going to raise money to do that, how they are going to manage expenses to be able to do that, what support they're going to need internally from their alumni bases, et cetera. I think all of those things, Mike, every school is working out right now. And I do think this model is going to iterate over time. What we're seeing today, we won't be seeing in a year or 5 years from now. I just see, and it may be a bumpy road as this model comes into being with the cap management system that's going to be needed, the NIL clearinghouse. It's being constructed by Deloitte to scrutinize third-party payments, which will be allowed to continue, but
Mhm.
with more rigor around whether they're for a valid business purpose or meet a permissible range to be determined by Deloitte. All those things, I would say, are right now significant unknowns. And I think, there are more questions than answers, I think, right now in terms of how this is going to play out over time, what it's going to mean in terms of who's going to be able to acquire the right players to meet their competitive objectives, what the fiscal responsibilities of schools become
Yep.
under or should be in this new model. Is going to be a big unknown. What it means for the academic side of the house, what it means for Olympic sports, women's sports, et cetera. We're at the dawn of a new era, is the best way I
Yeah.
can put this. But I do think, to answer your question, I do think the Big East is in a good spot
Yeah.
right now to capitalize on this. And I can assure you that, again, every one of our schools is committed to doing what it takes to remain competitive for national titles in basketball. So we'll see what happens.
And does it seem like the talent, like a top tier coaches, are understanding that concept and actually looking at the Big East a little differently? Like you saw sort of a move like Coach Willard or some other elements that had an undertone of, right, the Big East schools get to focus on basketball, get to use a big portion of the cap for basketball as a possible, sort of attractive model for more top tier talent to come in to the Big East time over
I
time.
think I can't speak for them, Mike. It's a good question. I think possibly that that's driving this. I can tell you that we have coaches in our league who have been at football-oriented schools, and they tell me it's a very different environment for them, to be at a school where basketball is not the number one sport.
Right.
Um, and I have people on my staff who've been at meetings, who've been at, in meeting rooms at football-driven conferences, and they tell me it's a very different vibe in the meeting room about where the priorities are. And I
Right.
can tell you the Big East, I mean, we talk basketball is sort of its number one here. It's always a priority here and always drives our conversations. So, I think for a coach, that's part of the calculation, right? When they decide
Right.
where they want to be, it's a basketball coach, especially. Do I want to be someplace where maybe the resources are more significant, assuming they're directed my way? Or do I want to be someplace where maybe the resources aren't quite the same way because there's not football money coming in, but the
Right.
focus on basketball is really is clear. And so I think it's a mix of reasons that our coaches are migrating here. But I can say we have been able to hold on to high quality coaches. We've got Hall of Famers in our league. We've got future Hall of Famers. Just an interesting stat: the top 8 coaches in our league have won 3,800 games. So
Wow.
we have 11 teams. That adds up to an average of, let me get this right, 375 wins per coach, which tops any other
Wow.
conference. So our
That's amazing.
coaches in the Big East, they know how to win.
Yeah.
And so it's now up to our schools to get them the resources they need in order for them to do their jobs.
Right. So maybe it's more about retaining those amazing coaches than attracting anybody else. It's like you've got the top talent already, which is amazing. So in so that's really helpful background on that, because it's a really interesting time, especially with some of our direct partners where we work with Villanova, Butler, and other partners. Exciting to hear about how they're going to start using that revenue sharing model to their benefit. One other big sort of meaty topic is all the conference jockeying that's happening in the world, and I love to hear the thing that we're hearing about is sort of Super League talk, right? Football's got a whole bunch of conversations around Super League talk, and there is some chatter around Super League talk in the basketball side as well, and looking at whether it's the Big East and the ACC, and you've heard some coaches sort of express some comments about this over time, and just to, it could be just all rumor, and you could say, hey, nothing to do here, but I'd just be interested in thoughts whether there's any sort of semblance that makes sense, or even something that's on the horizon.
Well, I would say the idea of a super league has been batted around. We've talked about it internally. We've thought about it. I'll be honest, Mike. I'm not quite sure how it works. Especially, I'll just give you a point of reference here. Um, the NCAA in basketball, there's a maximum contest limit.
Hmm.
It's about to go up to 32 games. That's not a lot of games. So if you've got the number of schools we have, 11 in the Big East, 32 games ends up giving you a very nice balance of non-conference games, games where you're playing against schools in different leagues, which all of our schools do. Conference contests. In our league, we have 20 of those because everybody plays everybody else home and away. So you play 10 opponents home and away. It's 20 games. Um, and then the occasional so-called multi-team event tournament, these so-called
Hmm.
MTEs, which are, think Feast Week,
Right.
where we've got schools in the Bahamas and Florida and Maui and
Right.
elsewhere playing in a little mini tournament with other mostly high majors.
Right.
It's a pretty good balance. If you've got only 32 games to work with and you've got a league or a combined league that has, make it up, 30 teams, just think about it. I mean, how do you, like, there's not enough games, if you
No.
will, to get everybody an appropriate number of games against each other in your league. Um, and so, the it's a very intriguing idea, but it sort of collapses, under its own weight because you don't have enough games really to dole out,
Hmm.
in order to make that, really worth it. In the NBA, you do, of course, with 30 teams, you play 82 games, but we don't have that in college basketball. So you have that. There are also complications, I would say, around network affiliations, especially if if the leagues or have competing networks. I don't know how you bring all of that together, given the long time horizon of these network
Right.
deals that we've all entered into. So it's very interesting, but I think it does get you thinking about possibilities, about alliances, about non-conference scheduling. We had two non-conference scheduling alliances with the Big Ten and the Big 12 that I thought were really good. Not they were win-win, but also I thought good for college basketball because it
Right.
created some early season intrigue and got sort of, it wasn't sort of cupcake games early. It was sort of, good high
Right.
major contests early on that, teams were challenging themselves. The networks loved them because it was big brands. Those two alliances have unfortunately expired. And so whether we can bring them back or not remains to be seen. But I think that would be the easiest way at this point to work with another league, high major league in basketball. But
Hmm.
all that said, you've been privy to this as well.
Hmm.
It's really hard to predict what's going to happen. We never
Yeah.
dreamed the Pac-12 would go away. And so where college sports takes us, particularly, as I said, at the dawn of this revenue sharing era, and what that might do to sort of further break up, leagues into the spenders and maybe the schools that aren't spending as most remains to be seen. And out
Right.
of that might come some opportunities to create some combinations that we hadn't thought possible before those developments happened.
Right, right. No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, it's so interesting, and yeah, it's going to be a sort of a puzzle that you got to put together over time because it says it's got to be based on a timeline. And, there's got to be the dollars to come in to force a change as well, which needs to be come from media dollars in some way because you're putting higher major games on TV. So it's an interesting sort of dance that we'll see if it how it plays out over time. But one of the cool things about the Big East is so many unique storylines. Right, we talked about the Pope. We talked about the Empire State Building. But one of the coolest things that's happened recently is the Pitino versus Pitino storyline. I love this one. Just exciting, father and son. I have some kids that don't aspire to be coaches, but aspire to be sports marketers and sports management people. So I'm rooting for a father and son or a father and daughter experience here in my life for work. But to see that happen on a coaching tree or on the court is so cool. With Richard Pitino at Xavier and obviously Rick Pitino at St. John's. How do you see that? What was your initial reaction when you saw that coming to happen, and now thinking about that storyline and where it goes? I just saw that Rick threw out the first pitch at the Yankees game. He's like embracing the whole New York thing. So I find it really exciting and fun to see this all happen in front of sort of the public and the media eyes, right? On the backdrop of the Big East Conference. How do you see all of that come together?
Well, I was really happy for Xavier when they were able to line up Richard as their new head coach after Sean Miller had left to go to Texas. Um, Richard's an up and comer, has done a great job along the way, including at New Mexico, his last stop. Um, I'm told that the plural of Pitino is not Patinos, but Pitini.
Okay.
So we will use that
That's
in
great.
our marketing campaigns, the Pitini. And yes, it's a very cool story that we've got a father and son coaching combination in the league. It's not the first time that we've had father and son in the league. I mean, we had Georgetown, we had John Thompson Jr.,
Right. Right.
who was the legendary coach for the Hoyas, and then he was eventually followed in that seat by his son JT3.
Mm,
And so, and we there were storylines that came out of that lineage.
hmm.
So, but I agree with you. It's a very cool storyline. I think when they play each other, it will be much anticipated matchup. Um, and we what also sort of we note is the league really has historically been about our coaches. I mean, think about the great iconic coaches of the Big East of yesteryear. I
Hmm.
mean, the league was built on the back of Big John, Lou Carnesecca, who we lost last year, Rollie Massimino, the great coach at
Mm,
Villanova, PJ Carlissimo at Seton Hall, Jim Boeheim, Jim Calhoun. I mean, the list sort of goes on. And so we've taken a lot of pride in the ability of our schools to continue to recruit and retain coaches of that caliber.
right.
And so now, you look around, you've got Coach Pitino, who's done a great job in 2 years at St. John's. The way too early polls have him as a top 5 team at St. John's going into the next year. Coach Hurley's won 2 national championships, following in the footsteps of his Hall of Fame father, who was uber successful at the high school level.
Hmm.
Um, got Shaka Smart, is doing great things at Marquette. Greg McDermott has been the legendary coach of Creighton. I could just go on and on about every one of our coaches and what they've done or what we think they can do. And so that's that those storylines I think really do help a league, particularly Mike with this era of player transience, if that makes sense.
Mm, sure. Yeah.
With players sort of coming and going with more regularity now, you're not necessarily going to see a player play at one program for 4 years. I'll use Villanova as example. I mean, Jalen Brunson grew up at Villanova. Colin Gillespie, Ryan Archidekino, they didn't transfer. They stayed there. They became sort of
Right.
iconic. We're not going to see maybe as much of that in this new era. So the coaches really do become the faces of their programs.
That's
And
very
so if
true.
you've got some good material to work with on that front, I think you're well served.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I like that comparable because you're not going to, right, you're not going to see that as much on the athlete side, that consistency. That's really interesting. Um, so now switching gears a little bit to women's sports for a second, just to think about the evolution of women's sports in college is really interesting. Women's basketball obviously has taken a significant growth play over the last 3 years with the NCAA tournament, the ratings, the success of a bunch of the Big East teams as well. What do you think is next for women's sports in the college ecosystem, and what do you think is needed from whether it's an investment standpoint or an exposure standpoint to continue to propel women's sports from a commercial perspective or an audience perspective to get sort of up in line with men's sports, which I do think is possible, but continued investment is needed. But how do you think that happens?
Well, and at we talk at the collegiate level, Mike. That's
Yeah,
the
collegiate
that's
level.
so I think you have to look at this women's college sports in a couple of ways. Number one, you have to look at it through the Title IX prism. Number
Mm,
one, and that I'm a beneficiary of Title IX. I mean, I think you mentioned our mutual tie with UVA. I was one of the
yeah.
first female scholarship recipients for athletics at
Wow.
UVA in 1977. I mean, we had virtually nothing back then, and
Yeah.
it took time for the the vision of Title IX to be fulfilled
Right.
at Virginia and elsewhere. So I've lived that journey, and to see now what women's sports are getting is really gratifying at UVA and my schools and across the board. That said, there's still you still have to pay attention to Title IX compliance. So that's one piece of it,
Hmm.
making sure that schools are doing what they should be doing under the law. And that was, of course, one of the upshots of the Kaplan report a couple of years ago because of irregularities in the men's and women's basketball tournaments that were
Right.
sponsored at the national level. So that's number one. Number two, The fan interest is clearly growing,
Right.
particularly at the top levels. I mean, that's where, the elite programs, the national championships in sports like basketball and softball and
Right. Yeah.
soccer. It seems clear, seems growing, seems monetizable.
Yep.
And I'm sure, seen that with the work that you all do there. Can
Yeah.
can can those financial outcomes improve and grow? That's what I think remains to be seen. And what's it going to take in order for that to happen?
Hmm.
And that's where I don't have the answers, because I do think, as you mentioned, some level of investment would be needed in
Right.
order to make money. You have to spend money. That sort of
Exactly.
credo. And so what does that mean? That means, more hiring more people, coming up with creative marketing campaigns, investment, et cetera. Will that happen in a revenue sharing era, when now schools are saying, okay, we'd like to, or feel like we have to pay the players. So in order to do that, maybe we have to manage our expenses on this side of the house. What's going to
Mm.
have to give in order for us to pay the players? Might that be the investment side that would have been easier to make a couple of years ago than it might be today? That's, to me, an unknown,
Right.
is what impact revenue sharing will have on the ability to invest and market and try to develop commercial strategies. Now, that said, I think schools are going to be more pressured financially than ever before, and they are going to have to figure out a way to generate new revenue or grow
Right.
existing revenue streams. And so I do think there's opportunity in certain sports to do that, because they have been undermarketed, underdeveloped. Maybe they've been what's the word, philanthropic? Is there a verb that you can put around philanthropy?
There might be. Yeah. There
Maybe they
might be.
need to work harder to get the alums of those sports to give back to their universities in ways that would help
Yeah.
these sports grow and generate some revenue. And then maybe there's just new ideas altogether. And you and I have talked over the years about what some of
Yeah.
those new structures might look like.
Right.
Those are the questions I think that remain to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Well, so Val, it's clear that the Big East is on this sort of moment of evolution and growth. I mean, you can see it whether it's double digit ratings growth in your both men's and women's basketball, whether it's the father and son storylines, even the Pope, right, the Empire State Building, the top tier coaches, the amazing national championships that's been collected by Big East teams. I mean, it's really an amazing trajectory for the business, and of course, all led by Hall of Fame commissioner here that we get to talk to today. So, so exciting for us. But I just love all that momentum and excitement, and all the success that you've created with your team at the Big East. What would you say if you were to sum up all of this right now, and you were to say, the conference's direction is X? One sentence that you would throw it into, just for our audience to wrap it up here for us today.
You'll laugh at this, maybe, Mike. My sentence is, the march of the Big East goes on.
Mm,
And for anybody who knows the league, that is actually a Dave Gavitt quote.
interesting.
Dave Gavitt, who founded the league in 1979, famously said, I think as the league was winding its way through its early years, going through change, dealing with football, growing, et cetera, apparently said at one point, the march of the Big East goes on. And so that, when I took this job, that sort of resonated with me, because back in 2013, when the league was reconfiguring, there were a lot of questions about whether this league, with its proud history, um, its rivalries, its Hall of Fame coaches, could remain relevant in a football world. But Dave Gavitt said that the march of the Big East goes on. And so I took that quote, and we actually have it etched into the wall, the glass wall of our main conference room.
That's
And
awesome.
it is a reminder to me that this has been a march. It will continue to be a march,
Mhm.
but it's going to go on.
Yeah.
And I tip my hat to the coaches, the administrators, the athletes, the business partners who have made this incredible journey possible.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been an honor to be able to, work the good shift. That's all you want. And, when you're in a job like this, you want to work your shift in a way that sort of keeps that history and that whatever the modern way of the brand value, whatever it is, you want to keep that identity strong and the reputation of your company at a top level. So that would be how I would sum it up, and that's what I hope we can keep doing. We want to keep marching into the future, and hopefully doing it with the same sort of results that we've had for the last 46 years.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Well, you mentioned the word honored. I'm honored to have you here with us today. So, thank you for spending time with me. One of the reasons that we at Playfly Sports love working with the Big East is because of Val and her team. Good people all around. So, I love working with good people. So, thank you, and thank you for being on the podcast today. So, we're going to wrap the John Wall Street Business of College Sports podcast, powered by Playfly Sports, here with Val Ackerman, the Big East Commissioner. So, thank you again for being with us, and we really appreciate the time. Really insightful, and hopefully our audience is going to have new learnings from today's discussion. So appreciate it, and go Big East.
Thanks, Mike.
All right,
Go Big
thanks,
East.
Val.